Tension on deck.
Hey, Ron, how you doing? Listen, since last week, right, what we did with Tony Raganella, not much has really happened in the city. So I don't know if we have anything really to talk about today, do we?
No, I mean, it's a slow news week. Not much going on in the NYPD. So how are things by you? I mean, the weather getting crazy. Got a cooler the last couple of days, a little cool, and it's going to get crazy hot again towards the end of the week. You're still up in New York, right?
Yeah, still up in the Big Apple here. Yeah, the weather is a little goes back and forth, right? One day it's nice out, the next thing you know, I know my son's been complaining about the electric bill with the AC on, so little domestic battles going on here and there, you know. How about yourself? How's everything down there in the Rockaways?
Yeah, doing good, doing good. And things are good. Heat, well, it's going to warm up a little bit, but we get that breeze. But yeah, so before we get into the current events, I just want to take a step back. I want to take a step back and talk about a topic that came up on the Friday Roundtable, and it's something that we've discussed in the past. It's been discussed about the 30 probationary police officers that are up for termination, and the PBA got the injunction because the Terrell Anderson over candidate assessment had overturned their disqualifications. I was in the comments, so it was a little difficult for me to get involved in the conversation. With that, I tried to get involved with the conversation. They had a full panel, so I couldn't come on. Some very strong opinions, which is understandable. So people have their very strong opinions about the process and about why things were done and how things were done. So I just want to clarify some points. It may not be a popular opinion, what I'm gonna say, and but I'm gonna run through. Even though some of this I did on the show, we talked about originally with the candidate assessment division. I'm going to run through the process, talk about the difference between the notice of proposed disqualification, the notice of disqualification, the authority to overturn it by the CO, where there is authority, where there isn't authority, and a couple of other things. I want to preface this by saying I am in no way, shape, or form defending what Inspector Anderson did. What I have defended and tried to explain and express is the process. And is the process perfect? It's not perfect. We'll talk about a couple of places that the process needs to be tweaked and or if not eliminated at this point, since it was, in my opinion, abused. So first things first, with the candidate assessment division, it is a division. Under that division, there are 4 sections. The character assessment section, they do the background checks, right? The psychological assessment section, they do the psychological evaluations. The medical assessment, they do the EKG, the color test, the hearing test, they do the Dole tests and everything like that. And then physical assessment, they do the job standard testing. That's when you run around, you drag the dummy, you jump over what used to be a wall is now a fence, pull the trigger a certain amount of times up and down the stairs, blah, blah, blah. All 4 of these sections make a recommendation to the CO of Candidate Assessment Division on the suitability of the candidate from their investigations. That includes psychological assessment. So when I went there in 2016, I was assigned there under Chief Pizzuti as the Chief of Personnel. I was asked to take a bird's eye view look at everything that was going on and try and help to streamline the process, make things better, because there were obvious problems and there were deficiencies and there were delays in the hiring process. They were very backlogged. So I went in, I looked at a lot of things. One of the things that I saw was a lot of backlog and problems with the psychological assessment section's review process that had an air of uh, it appeared to be an unfair process to me. Whereas when a candidate gets an appeal, their appeal interview is with another psychologist in the same section who work under the same supervisors. So not that they aren't professionals. I talked about this in the last episode. Not that they aren't professional psychologists and professionals in what they do. It just didn't seem like a fair process that they were being reevaluated by the same section. So changes were proposed, and then Chief Lori Pollack came in as the commanding officer of the Candidate Assessment Division. And under Chief Lori Pollack, the changes that I had recommended, and then after she did her review, she identified things. She put together proposals and presented them. Part of the process changes was, again, the psychological assessment division and the appeals process. Okay. The appeals process.
Real quick question. Did
Ed.
Lori have to get permission from anybody? Did she have to move that up to chief of personnel, or was that okay for her to make that change it within her position?
For the authority of the overturns that I'm going to get into?
Yeah.
I'll get into that. It actually went all the way up to the first deputy commissioner. It went past
Okay.
the chief of personnel. So let me bring up, just to help clarify a little bit. All right. Well, to the end. A notice of proposed disqualification is when a psychologist in the psychological assessment section, right, recommends a candidate for disqualification, and it's approved by a supervising psychologist. So then what happens? The candidate gets a notification of a notice of proposed qualification, and they get options of what they can do at that point. They can request an appeal, which is not guaranteed, right? And that request could be as little as sending in a letter stating, hey, I don't think this was fair. I shouldn't have been disqualified. I deserve a second chance. Now, obviously, I don't think that candidate is going to get an appeal because they're not giving justification as to why they deserve an appeal. But there are psychologists that are out there, and the psychologists that work in this field, they may have worked for the Candidate Assessment Division back in the day when it was applicant processing or whatever the case may be. They know the process. There's lawyers and there's psychologists that are in the field. Like anything else, if you're going through a divorce, you want to go to a divorce lawyer. If you're going through something to do with real estate, you want to go to a real estate lawyer. So if you want to go through this process, you want to go to the right type of psychologist that could handle the case for you, or the right type of lawyer. So you have a chance to go get your own psychologist, notify the department within 30 days that you're going to request an appeal. You don't have to put the appeal in within 30 days. You have to notify the department within 30 days that you're going to appeal and get the psychologist, because the psychologist has to see you, has to evaluate you, has to get copies of the paperwork from the police department so that they can see what they're working with, and then they submit their appeal. Now, the appeal goes to an appeals psychologist, a supervising psychologist that's in charge of reviewing all the requests for appeals. And those appeals are presented to the executives at Candidate Assessment Division. We used to sit down once the doctor had cases to present to us. I think this person should get an appeal. I don't think this person should get an appeal. Okay? So those are that's the option with the appeal. You can withdraw your application from the process at that time, which is a WNOPD. And the benefit to doing that is you are never going to be disqualified if you withdraw your application. Okay? You just can no longer process under that exam. You can take another police exam and start the process over, but you can withdraw. And when you do withdraw, the benefit to withdrawing is that if any other agency requests information, like Department of Corrections or anything else, or another police agency, the only information that could be given is that the candidate withdrew from the process. then you're not going to be told that they were being proposed for disqualification because they never went through their due process and they were never disqualified. So you're just going to find out, well, he was applying for the job and he withdrew from the job, or she withdrew from the job. Then
I was just saying, quick question. It's because I knew somebody that was going through the state police, and they kind of did the same thing. Like the guy wasn't going to pass everything with, they were question his integrity. So they said, we don't want to fail you. If you resign or withdraw, nobody else knows. How do does other agencies contact the NYPD ever and say, hey, or does the applicant have to tell them that I also applied for the NYPD? Like, in other words, is there a systematic statewide database that would know that I withdrew from a police department or that I failed a psychological somewhere?
No, they're not going to know unless you disclose it to them. But if they find out through any other means, because during their investigation, they may somehow find out that you applied for the NYPD, and then they're going to be like, well, you didn't tell us you applied for the NYPD. Because part of every process is, have you been hired or applied for or disqualified from any other police agency? So, technically, no, there's no database where it's going to pop up, hey, Ron Leyson applied for the NYPD but never got hired.
Right.
And then ask them why. Well, I withdrew. I didn't want, and then they could say, I didn't want the job. I didn't like the way the atmosphere was in New York City. I didn't want to move. It was too far of a commute, whatever the case may be. And the NYPD is not going to go against that statement because we're not going to release any other information other than you withdrew.
Right. Okay.
So the other option is if the candidate does not respond to the notice of proposed disqualification after 30 days, the person will then receive a notice of disqualification. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. So currently, well, I don't know about currently, but while Inspector Anderson was there, the CO candidate assessment can overturn the recommendation of a proposed disqualification, right? Because it's only a recommendation from the psychological assessment section at that point. If the CO feels that it's an unjust proposed disqualification, they can overturn that and they can qualify the candidate at that point for psychological. Or this also goes for candidates in character also. If the character side feels that there's a proposed disqualification, the same process happens, except you don't go to another psychologist for an appeal. You really have to go to the Civil Service Commission, right? But here also, the CO candidate assessment can overrule the recommendation of the appeal psychologist and approve an appeal. So when that psychologist comes down for that meeting and says, all right, Ron Leyson, I don't feel there's evidence that warrants a second look by another psychologist. I don't think we should grant the appeal. The CO candidate assessment can say, I want that candidate. I don't agree with you. I want that candidate to get another appeal, an appeal. The appeals process is now, because of the changes that were made under the Pollock administration, was that the appeals were now going over to what's called PEST, Psychological Evaluation Section, over in One Left Rack City Plaza. And they were seen by a different psychologist not working and associated with candidate assessment and the psychological assessment section, right? So it's it's the same psychologist, same certification, same title, but it's a different place where they're going to go with psychologists that don't fall under the supervision direction of the psychological assessment section's director. So they can get the appeal. So the CO at that point, and that authority was always in place. Okay, that authority was always in place. That they could say this person deserves an appeal. You're not overturning it and qualifying the person. You're just saying, I think this person put in enough information, enough evidence that we should grant them an appeal to go and see another psychologist, and then leave it to that. Okay. Once a notice of disqualification is issued, this is the final disposition when a candidate has either one, failed to respond to the notice of proposed disqualification within 30 days. They just blow it off and they say, well, I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to do anything. Now they're going to be disqualified, a notice of disqualification. Or they were denied the appeal interview after it was reviewed by the appeals psychologist and the CO of candidate assessment. Or they had their appeal interview and the original proposed disqualification was upheld by the second psychologist over in PES, right? At this point, once a notice of disqualification is given, the candidate is supposed to be removed from the DCAS civil service list. We call it the CERT, and no longer eligible for hire under that exam. They have every right to take the next police exam, or if they were already on another list, because they're given the test so often, they could be on multiple lists, right? If you just went in and took the test. So, but once you get a notice of disqualification, pretty much the NYPD is done with you. Done with you. There's no further investigations. There's no further involvement. Your investigation in all areas ceases. Nobody else is looking at you. They're not looking at your background anymore, anything, right? What are the candidates' options once a notice of disqualification is given? They can appeal to the New York City Civil Service Commission, right? I put committee, I think it's commission, within 30 days. If the CSC finds in favor of the candidate, he or she is reinstated on the CERT and processed for hire. But if the CSC does not reverse the CAD NOD, the candidate can only option left is to file an Article 78 hearing in the New York State Court of Appeals. And that's only if they feel that the disqualification was arbitrary and capricious. So then they can go and try an Article 78 and say that the psychologist failed me, the appeals psychologist failed me, and the Civil Service Commission didn't find in my favor, and they say that I'm not a viable candidate either. All right? But the CO of candidate assessment does not have the authority to overturn a notice of disqualification. So this is the big point. The 30 people that were subject to possible termination or pending termination, from what I read in the newspaper, were all issued final notices of disqualification. So Terrell Anderson did not have the right, he did not have the authority to overturn those disqualifications. And the administrative portion where the CERT, where they remove names from the CERT, it isn't an automatic thing. There's a process that candidate assessment has to go through to compile a list. It cleans up the CERT of who's still a viable candidate, who's been hired, and who's been disqualified. And then they send that to DCAS, and then DCAS updates the list. It takes time, and it's usually a backlog over a candidate assessment to do that. They're supposed to do it after each hire, but once the hires were done quarterly, it gets a little more difficult to do because it's a very time-consuming process. So these candidates obviously weren't removed from the CERT because they were hired. So that's a question right there. So there's the difference between an NOPD and an NOD. And like I said, when I went in there and did my evaluation, made my recommendations, I made my recommendations to First Deputy Commissioner Tucker. Then Chief Pollock was appointed as the CO of CAD. So I obviously brought her up to speed on everything that I had discovered and presented everything to her. And she did her due diligence and everything else, right? So the appeals process was revamped the way I explained it. But also one of the things that was missing in the written processes was the establishment of a written chain of command where the final authorization for hire is the CO of Candidate Assessment Division, not the psychologists in the psychological assessment section, right? And looking at the cases, you saw what felt like a lot of the cases in psychological assessment section were being disqualified for reasons other than psychological, under the umbrella of poor impulse control, immaturity that doesn't warrant hire as a police officer because of red cup violations in college or in the street. It's been we've talked about these things in the past. One-time altercations, possibly a misdemeanor arrest, things like that. That the character side is investigating all the facts and circumstances around those situations, those summonses. There's a thing called time and distance from derogatory information. We talked about that. So they may be old cases or whatever the case may be. Look at the totality of the candidate and any other derogatory information. So the authority to have the final say and overturn the recommendation of a notice of proposed disqualification was written into that new process. And to answer your earlier question, yes, it had to go up the chain of command. It had to be approved by the chief surgeon, Dr. Kleiman. It had to be approved by the chief of personnel. And it had to be ultimately approved by the first deputy commissioner, because under the organizational chart, that's where the personnel bureau and candidate assessment fall. So there's the process of where it happens. Now, where I see that there's a little, I'll call it confusion, is that he had the authority to overturn notice of proposed disqualifications. So now there's supposedly like 74 of these cases altogether, right? So another 40 some odd cases, if I'm reading it right in the paper, that the 30 some odd people were given final notices of disqualification. The other 40 some odd cases, he had the authority to overturn. Now, like I said in the prior podcast, I can't think of any way, shape, or form that you could come up with justifying overturning that many cases. One or two, maybe over a 2-year period. That many cases, I don't see the justification in it. I don't know. And you're supposed to be able to justify it and answer for it. And I'm assuming he's going to be called on the carpet eventually and asked about every one of these cases. So having the authority, playing devil's advocate, if he's going to say that I reviewed these cases of the NOPDs, right, the notice of proposed disqualifications, and I felt they were unjust for reasons X, Y, and Z. So I used my authority and overturned them. Okay, now the job can come back and say, well, we look at these cases case by case. We disagree. We think your judgment is impaired, that you think that these cases should be overturned. But where is the violation at that point, right? You following? Where's the violation at that point? He had the authority to do it. I don't think it could be justified. And if the job says it's not justified and you should remove yourself, then he would get removed from his position, right? Which he was removed anyway. But where the problem is the NODs, the notice of disqualifications. Okay. Now, here's where the question comes in, where we discussed this before the show last Friday. It was brought up during the show, and there was a strong opinion against what I'm about to say. There's a difference between the authority to do it and having the access to do it. Okay. He did not have the authority to overturn a notice of disqualification. Once that final notice of disqualification, that's civil service law. That person is disqualified. Then the only recourse is the Civil Service Commission on Article 78. You can't come back to the NYPD. We're not giving you another chance. You exhausted your NYPD process of your availability to appeal, whether you did or not. You had that availability. If you got your appeal, then it got overturned. It didn't get overturned. The notice of proposed disqualification. So now you have a minimum of 2 psychologists with a middle psychologist kind of evaluating the validity and giving you your second chance, who were all saying basically this person shouldn't be a police officer for X, Y, and Z.
Can you ever reapply after that though? Like
100%.
Even if you got a notice of disqualification, you could still redo it again?
Absolutely. That is absolutely, you're right. You're removed from that exam. You're not precluded from ever applying again. Now, in the NYPD, we're going to have access to this information, obviously, and
Right.
be able to cross-reference any prior exam numbers, because your social security number is going to come up and it's going to show that you took these civil service exams, right? So, yes. And is it possible that you were disqualified when you were 21, 22 years old, and now you took another exam and it's 3 or 4 years later, and you were disqualified for some actions that happened when you were 18 years old? Now that's 6 years ago. And during that 6 years, you have no derogatory information. You have steady employment with no disciplinary history. You went into the military. You were discharged with an honorable discharge and have no problems in your military history. There's a possibility you could get hired. It's not a death sentence to the NYPD. Depending on the circumstances of why you were disqualified, the time and distance from the last disqualification or derogatory information from why you were disqualified to the time that you apply again could give you the possibility of getting hired. So that's why, you could always take another exam. This only applies to the current exam. So yeah, you can. So now back to the authority versus access. So in the system, I'll say it was an oversight in putting. First of all, the system was antiquated, and when I was leaving, they were revamping it, but they didn't want to make a lot of changes. They were just updating the processes, the technology, right? And once a final disposition goes in of a notice of disqualification, your case review sheet and your case in the computer should be locked. It should be locked out. Nobody should have any access to it anymore, because there's no reason to go back into that case unless the Civil Service Commission or the Article 78 orders us to start reevaluating that candidate, right? So it should be at the highest level, like the Chief of Personnel's office, right? That wasn't the case. So what appears to have happened is he went into these NODs and he flipped them to a qualify. Now, he didn't have the authority to do that. And I don't know the legal ramifications. And that's why I think the job is saying we couldn't legally hire them, because under civil service law, they were disqualified and supposed to be removed from the cert, removed from the exam. It was said that having access gives authority. I totally disagree with that statement. Just because there was a backdoor access to be able to go in and abuse your access because of your title and your level of access in the system because you're the CO, doesn't give you the authority to do it, and doesn't make it right. You have to have integrity. And that's what my argument is. Access is not authority. An example was given. You can't bring a kid into a candy store, let him touch and feel all the candy, and not let him take any. Well, I disagree. You can take it, but you got to pay for it. You got to do it the right way. You can't just take it and walk out. That's theft. So I counter that argument that was brought up on the show. Same thing as, it was a candy store and a toy store. Yeah, you can't just walk in, take it, and leave, unless you're in, Rite Aid in New York City. But that's another issue, right? But I'll give you this example to counter that example, right? You have access to a property room where all the property from cases are, right? That doesn't give you the authority to remove that property, even though you have access. I'm the desk officer. I got keys to the property room. I'm the property cop, or the cop that's checking off the property list, right? I have access to that property room. Doesn't give me the authority to take the property. So access and authority, to me, are not interchangeable. So him having the access to do it did not give him the authority. And that's my stance on the difference between access and authority. So I haven't been able, I know the chat is blowing up. I haven't been able to keep up with the chat.
Yeah, there's
any questions that you saw in there about this specific topic?
Yeah, there are. So I just with access and authority,
Yeah.
I agree with you that he even though he had the access, he didn't have the authority, and it is based on a level of integrity, right? But also within the NYPD, they usually limit the access because they don't trust in the individuals, well, with the authority, because right. So there's been times where, and you and I know when we talked about this earlier, is when the promotion process is through and you can vote on other deputy inspectors, inspectors and stuff. You can't vote on people higher than your own rank. And that's something they put in, that they put that limitation in specifically towards your rank. So somewhere along the line, Terrell should not have been able to access that because he didn't have the authority. But on to your point, absolutely. Even though he had the access, he still didn't have the authority to do it. And that's based on a level of integrity. Now, was he told to do it? I mean, that's a question we'll have to find out, right?
Okay.
Because,
Right.
and was he pressured? You know, we all know as executives that there are political pressures from internally and externally, and that some unfortunately continges on your promotions and you're moving up in the job and not being tabled. So, that would be another part of it. But I think that will all come out too, right?
Right. I'll talk about that. I'll talk about my opinions on that because again, I don't know. None of us know for sure exactly what's going on. But just to answer Hunter's question real quick, or her
Yeah, well,
comment.
actually, the first one
Yeah.
was the first one I had listed was JDP 074, which was at five. I gave that out at 511. Let me get up there. Um, let's see.
511.
Yeah, the time was 511 when he gave the question out.
Where does the medical division fit into all of this, especially
Yeah.
when we're dealing with psychological matters? Does the CO of candidate assessment have more authority than the CO of the medical division? Okay. Both the psychological assessment section and the medical division are overseen by the chief surgeon, Dr. Eli Kleinman. There's a CO of the medical division that oversees the medical division, the sick desk, the district surgeons, and all of that. Article 2, all of that. In candidate assessment division, the psychological assessment section answers to, and also the medical division is under the personnel bureau. So both the medical division and the candidate assessment division are, our parent command was the personnel bureau. So the chief of personnel was our boss, who falls under the first deputy commissioner. So the way it works is, no, the CO of the medical division, they actually work hand in hand with us because the psychological evaluation section, the other psychologists where the appeals candidates get their appeals and go to, actually falls under the medical division. And that's the reason we say that we feel that the candidates, there can't be any illusion of impropriety. And again, I'm not saying that there was any impropriety. I'm not saying that they weren't more than the very professional, the psychologists that I work with for the, there was some that I had some issues with, but that's going to be in every profession, in every rank, and every title, right? But so they go over to the psychological evaluation section, which falls under the medical division. So there's no undue pressure like you're talking about to pass or fail this candidate. They're getting a fair look because those psychologists don't answer to the director at the psychological assessment section, whose unit is the one that initially proposed the disqualification. That's why that process was put into effect. And so it's a intricate process where the candidate is given a very fair shake. So that's why it's hard pressed to say, hey, this candidate, as the CO of candidate assessment division, I would find it hard. And Lori Pollock, Chief Pollock, never utilized that authority that she had written into the policy during her tenure there. And while I was there, it was never used either. even after she left, because I was there with Inspector Winsky, then Chief Winsky, Ed Winsky, when he took over for Lori Pollock. But so you don't have more authority. It's different authority. You have authority over the psychological assessment section. They have authority over the psychological evaluation section, which is what people think of as psych services, right? So it's different. Both have the medical oversight of Dr. Kleiman, and then Dr. Reddy, who's the chief psychologist or psychiatrist on the job. And then under him is another psychologist that is in the order. So I hope that answers the question for that. And then to get back to Hunter, your friend failed the NYPD site and got on with the corrections and now works over at JFK or whatever. Again, just because you failed doesn't mean that you can't pass later on, even in the NYPD. And if they failed, was it a notice of the disqualification, proposed disqualification? Maybe they withdrew. So corrections isn't going to get the information as to why they were even going to propose the disqualification. That's all kept confidential at that point. So they don't even get that information. The only information they're going to get is that the person was withdrew from the process. Right? They don't even tell you at what point they withdraw. So now let's get back to, like you said.
John B had another question for you at 5:18.
Oh, you're killing me.
Sorry. He said, "Can you discuss the question?" I think we touched on it a little bit, and I think you answered a little bit, but I just wanted to address that question. Can you yeah, you got it.
Can you discuss the question I hear often? If a candidate receives an NOPD, is it better to withdraw and try again or better to appeal? Completely depends on the circumstances. Completely depends on the circumstances. Because there are some instances where I reviewed cases, like I told you on the last podcast that we did on this, I was the quote unquote contract guy. I'm the one that fielded every phone call, almost every phone call from every executive, family member at whatever rank on the job. They were all funneled to me for quote unquote inquiries to look into a case if somebody's case was stalled and they may not have even known why, because maybe the notice of disqualification didn't go out yet because psychological assessment section was so far behind that they may not have even been able to push it out. So this person hasn't heard anything for months and months. Now a class is coming up. They want to know, hey, what's going on? I went through the whole process. I never heard anything. So they didn't hear good or bad. They didn't know that they were being proposed for disqualification. So you look at the case and you go, ooh, that's some pretty bad stuff. You know what? This candidate is probably better off for their life and their career if they withdraw, because they're probably not going to pass an appeal no matter what you do, because the derogatory information or the medical information that they're aware of is something that just isn't going to go away, especially right now. It could be withdraw from this exam, and the advice would be take the next police exam. Give it a little more time and distance and try again to answer that question. You got any more before I move forward with the times?
A little bit of maturity, right? I think that's
100%. A lot of times it is maturity. A lot of times, and like I said, the fact that Chief Pollock initiated this authority to overturn their proposed disqualification because sometimes they said it was immaturity isn't a blanket statement either, because a lot of times they look at the reasonings behind behaviors, which is what their profession is, and they'll say, listen, this person's done X, Y, and Z, not just X, but X, Y, and Z, and it shows a lack of maturity. And it's only been a year since they graduated college, and they were constantly in trouble in college. It's a lack of maturity, possibly a lack of impulse control, depending on what the problems were. And then, you know what? That person they should withdraw so that they're not being held up from anything else, and try again. Mm-hmm. Try again in the future. Give it another year or two where you can show that I've had positive employment. I've never been in trouble. I've never been locked up for DWI. I've never gotten to see summons for drinking alcohol, whatever the case may be. So yeah. Well, let's get back, before we do any more questions or anything, let's get back to another point that I was trying to make, right? The problem I see with the 30 NODs, right? The notice of disqualifications that were flipped to qualify and wound up getting hired. First of all, I spoke about the candidate review board, right? I spoke about that with you guys. I didn't talk about that on the podcast. The candidate review board means once everybody is qualified in all 4 of those sections, right? Medical, JST, job standard testing, the physical test, medical, psychological, and character. The qualifications were sent up. The recommendations for qualifications were sent up on all 4. It has to go in front of a case review board where an executive, and when I was there, it was 6 executives in the Personnel Bureau. I was one of them, and there were 5 other executives in the Personnel Bureau. Lori Pollack did not get involved in that because she felt that since she had the ultimate say, she didn't want to get involved in the case review board. She wanted unbiased eyes to look at this and say, do you agree? Read through. And it wasn't one of those things where the menu comes up and you could click approve, 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 approve. You literally had to go through every single page and click through every single page of the case to get to the end, had to put in comments and put in your recommendation of approval. All right. So that, like I said, used to be 6 executives in the Personnel Bureau because we used to have to reach out to them sometimes because they were very busy and say, hey, listen, could you please, these candidates, we can't notify them for hire until you approve them. And it's getting close. You need to find time. So you had, that's another checks and balances, right? That we're not just pushing people through. So from what I understand, from talking to people that have recently retired or are currently at Candidate Assessment Division, that's no longer the case. The Candidate Review Board is now the CO of Candidate Assessment, the XO of Candidate Assessment, and CO of Character Assessment Section. So it's 3 in-house executives. I find that to be a little bit of a conflict and kind of defeats the purpose of the checks and balances, because you're really not having any fresh eyes looking at it. So people say, well, and it was brought up on the show, and it was brought up also on the part of what I had said, because, you know, if I'm flipping all these bad actors and then you're reviewing it, you're kind of looking at it going, well, how did this guy get through? How did this guy get, you know what I'm saying? You're looking at it and you're seeing the derogatory information. Now you're going to approve it too? Something doesn't seem right there. So the question was, hey, did IAB look at these candidates, which I'm sure they did, and see who did the final approval? And I would bet, you know, dollars on pennies that it would be the same person. Well, now it could very well have been Terrell Anderson flipped them and then approved them. I don't know. But I do know that the Candidate Review Board policies have changed. So now it's in-house, which I think is a conflict and I think needs to be changed. The only reason to look at those notice of disqualified candidates, those people were done. They're not going to come up. If I'm doing a query to try and find viable candidates, if somebody has an NOPD from one of the sections, that's going to come up because they're going to be either qualified or still open-ended in the other sections. So that might give me a reason to look at that candidate because I'm trying to fill the class, right? Undue pressure is what the union said to fill the classes. Okay. But now you got to get into it and say, why did these candidates get looked at? Contracts. It's the only reason to look at a notice of disqualified candidate. The only reason to look is somebody called up and said, hey, what's going on with, you know, cousin Rob, or my brother, or my niece, or my nephew, or my landscaper's kid, or whatever. And you got those phone calls. And I truly believe 99.9% of all of those flips were phone calls. Now, if you're going to say it's undue pressure because an executive called you, listen, I got those phone calls from as far as the chief of staff of the police department. And I had the integrity to tell the chief of staff, I'm sorry, there's nothing we could do. Maybe the candidate should appeal. Here's the appeals process, and help them through the appeals process. But I'm not flipping a candidate because a boss calls me and tells me so. We had that integrity.
But I'll argue the point that it was a different regime. And if you're talking to Ray Spinella, who had common sense and understanding, and other people in those offices that had the integrity not to ask you to do something that's not right, and then you look at this current administration that will do anything for nepotism and cronyism, that's their bottom line, right? So I mean, totally different. And should Terrell have done it? Absolutely not. If he was requested to do it, but it was a different. You had the integrity with a bunch of people that would give it. If you did that now, probably if you were in that position now and you got a call from the administration as it was with Madry and Caban and all those, I bet you would have been tabled somewhere. You would have been the midnight duty inspector for the rest of your career.
But you know what? You have to look at it and you have to say, you know what? What is my integrity worth? I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm not going to compromise my integrity. I'm going to do, if you want somebody to do that, find somebody else. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
They did.
Well, after he got caught, right?
Right.
So, I hope I clarified, and I know people aren't going to agree, and I'm not going to change people's opinions on it, but I just wanted to clarify the technicalities of everything. And again, my opinion from my corporate knowledge of the whole process is that there's no reason to look at those NOD cases other than a phone call. That's it. And again, I also believe that the rest of them, and they weren't all psychological disqualifications. Some of them were character disqualifications that were overturned also. So,
and again, I'll also say what really infuriates me is that these poor guys and gals that got those NODs and then got the call, unknowingly said, "Hey, I'll take. Yeah, I want the job, absolutely, and I'll come in." And then they went through the police academy or in the police academy, out on the streets, and now they're being told that they're not eligible. Well, that's the fault of the NYPD and the administration, not those poor cops that actually accepted their positions.
I'll push back a little bit, where I'll say the candidates with the NOPDs, I agree, because they weren't even afforded the due process of a candidate to do an actual appeal if they were going to be proposed for disqualification. Those that went through the process and got a notice of disqualification were fully aware that they were disqualified.
You're right, but I'll push.
They don't have, but it doesn't matter because the job didn't have a legal right under civil service law to hire them.
And if it wasn't
I'm not saying they don't have a civil action possibly, but I don't think that the job can legally keep them certified as police officers because they didn't pass the certification process, which is the background check, the psychological check, the physical check, and the medical check. You have to pass all those things to be certified as a police officer.
And I agree with you. And if it wasn't for the podcast, your information and what John and Eric and Marlon and Sal all put out, I wouldn't have known it either. So all I'm saying is it's not their fault. And then there should be some compensation or something for them then if they actually get terminated or whatever, or maybe a civilian spot or whatever. But it's totally unfair that these guys, thought they were taking a job. Maybe they got the notice of disqualification and said, okay, I got it. But then you get a phone call from somebody, right? And says, come on down. You start the police academy on Monday. And are you going to argue? Say, no, hold on. I already got this notice of disqualification.
Why did they get that? Because they made somebody made a phone call for them.
Maybe so not.
They're complicit in the process of circumventing the civil service law and the process.
But some of them might not even know when a phone call was made for them. I've made phone calls for people and they didn't even know. So it's like, hey, you might get a call from somebody else. Who knows? But I'm just saying,
listen, I don't know. I don't know what the legal outcome is going to be. I don't know what is right and what's wrong. I think the people with the NOPDs that got flipped, they should probably bring them in, take a second look, almost like giving them an appeal interview. And I guarantee you, unless there's something really egregious as to why they were being proposed for disqualification. If they're showing that they've had a year and a half of positive employment with the NYPD, that is something that would be taken into consideration
It
under
should be.
appeal, where they would probably be qualified. Like I said, time and distance. So when you do the appeal, that's what people are going to look at. People are going to look at the time and distance between the derogatory information and what have you done since the reason that we felt that we're going to disqualify you.
Yeah. Something should be done. I think, like
Yeah.
KB says, move them to the fire department or the Department of Sanitation. Give them something, man. But don't leave them out to dry.
I don't know. All right, but this went a lot longer than I wanted to. This is
apparently you're passionate about it. I don't know why.
I'm absolutely passionate about it because I spent a couple of years of my life in there trying to make the process better for everybody, for the candidates, for the job, for the people that work there, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that we left it in a good place. But as we're going to talk about in a little while, you know, this administration, you know, things have just collapsed. And a lot of it has to do with integrity. And I think this scandal, if you want to call it a scandal, has to do with lack of integrity. So, you know, just before we move on, there's, you know, we're talking about candidate assessment division, and I got some really sad news on Monday that one of the captains that worked for me that we brought on, Lori and I brought on to the candidate assessment division, John Kimball, passed away. Active captain, 35 years of service with New York City Police Department. He was appointed October 15th, 1990, and he passed away on Monday, the 21st, of an apparent heart attack. Father of two, brother, son, all around a really good guy. That smile, really, that picture there really captures, you know, his really captures him. You know, that it's a tragedy. You know, prayers go out to his family, the coworkers over at Candidate Assessment, who held him in high regard. He always had their backs, and he always fought, I think, for the right candidates. He would come to me, you know, and fight for the right candidates. He was always appreciated of Chief Pollock bringing him on to the Candidate Assessment Division. So sad news. His wake will be tomorrow on Staten Island, and his funeral on Friday. So just, you know, rest in peace, John, and prayers out to those at the Candidate Assessment Division and to his family.
Yeah, it's always sad when you see, you know, somebody that worked so hard, you know, dedicated 35 years of his life to the NYPD, and then unfortunately doesn't get to enjoy some of the benefits of being retired, you know, and then, you know, like you said, God bless his family, man. You know, and I pray and hope, and I'm sure that the NYPD will, you know, that's where the NYPD kind of steps up, where they take care of the family when there's such tragedy like this. I mean, usually these are considered like a line of duty, you know, especially a heart attack and stuff.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
it's no consolation to the family. It's still a great loss. But believe me, you know, my prayers and thoughts go to the family. And I didn't know John, but John, rest in peace, brother. Thank you for your service.
Yeah. All right. So moving right along, some other news for the week that, you know, it's like it's things that make you go, with everything that's going on in the news and everything that's going on with this administration, under the Eric Adams administration. I don't know how this came to be. 13 law enforcement unions endorse Eric Adams in his New York City mayoral race. What are your thoughts on this picture?
See, I don't know why that they would even endorse. I mean, look at the candidates, and unless you're going to go with somebody that's really pro law enforcement, supports the police, has always supported the police, like Curtis. Why would you endorse anybody? And I go back to where the president of the DEA had a vote, right? He voted for everybody for a presidential candidate, and when he didn't get the person that he wanted, they still endorsed somebody else, right? They didn't, or they didn't put any endorsement out. So I don't understand why these unions need to seek any endorsement at this time. And to somebody has not been good to the unions, has not been good to the law and order of the city, is beyond me. Why you could just step back and not do any endorsement, which I would think would take a better president. It would look better if you did that.
I 100% in agreement with you that if you don't feel that you want to endorse, you don't want Mondami to win, so you're going to endorse Eric Adams. You don't want Cuomo to win, so you endorse Eric Adams. You don't feel confident in Curtis Sliwa. You don't feel confident in Jim Walden. Then don't endorse anyone. Why would you endorse someone whose entire administration has been just covered in a fog of scandal, we'll call it? Because, right, nobody's been convicted of anything. There's all allegations. They're all investigations, of what's going on. And nothing's been proven. But come on, when every single person in your administration, in your upper administration, is either been forced out, indicted, or under investigation by the feds, had your phones removed, search warrants on your houses, you're forced to remove under the cloud of a lot of civil lawsuits on sexual harassment in the workplace, in the position, not even just ones from back when they were in the police department. Lawsuits that are filed against them for actions they took while in the Eric Adams administration. I don't understand. Like you said, don't endorse anybody like they did for the presidential, right? Like you said, Scott Monroe said, oh, we're going to take a vote. Trump was the overwhelming winner. I forget what the numbers were. John had the numbers. But they didn't come out and endorse him. So don't endorse anybody. But to get this coalition together, and then Scott Monroe from the DEA puts out this statement, right? One of the NYPD, right, endorses Adams, said the lawsuits against Adams and his top NYPD advisors aren't important to his members, arguing that the mayor has his group's support because he believes in the police. The lawsuits against Adams and his top advisors aren't important to his members. What members is he talking to? Because everybody that we talk to is concerned. Anybody in the Finest Unfiltered network talks to is concerned. I haven't talked to anybody, family, friends, former coworkers, that aren't concerned, whether you live in New York or don't live in New York, that aren't concerned about all these lawsuits and investigations against the Adams administration. I don't get it. So, I like you said, don't endorse them if you don't want to endorse them. But how do you say that he has your members' best interests at heart?
Think about it, right? 4 police commissioners. Okay, so now you're pro law enforcement. You can't even get somebody to run the police department. On top of that, you got to figure that the only reason these unions are endorsing Adams, and Adams is polling so low, right? He's the lowest out of the 4 polling. So like you're endorsing like somebody is really on the bottom of the list. And Scott, what does he say? Scott says, well, I was able to get 19 first graders, from the mayor. So is that what it's all about? Is getting a promotion? No, it should be about who is the best candidate to run the city, and make sure that the unions are happy. Then at that point, make sure your members are happy and they have good working conditions, and that they're supported by the mayor and the police department and the city council. You want that support. Are you going to garnish that? No. What are you looking? You're only going to look so you can walk up to his office and say, "Hey, I need some more promotions." No. So I mean, it's just like I said, I liked when he did the vote. I always said that when they would when the CEA would endorse somebody, I'd be like, I don't endorse that candidate. How does the president of the CEA and the vice president say we're going to endorse that somebody? They should put out a vote and have everybody talk about it, and the majority of members pick a candidate, and then that's who the union should endorse. I thought that was a great idea, and he did it. But then what does he do? He goes back on his word and says, "Oh, I'm not going to endorse anybody." It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and they're not concerned about the investigations. But Sal just put out a post, right? A little while ago before the show, about an article that the Gothamist put out, right? They're stating that what Sal said on his show back in February is that the investigation to Eric Adams and all his cronies were paused, and the FBI agents and attorneys are furious over this. And then in the article itself, it says Humo, a lawyer for Pearson, said that federal investigations of his client and everyone else in the administration appear to be paused. Everything is on hold after the mayor's case was dismissed. Not just Tim Pearson, all those people under investigation, Mo told the Gothamist. Mo said he has not recently heard of any witnesses being brought before the grand jury. He attributed the lack of activity to political considerations. Political considerations, not merits of the case, right? Tied to the dismissal of the mayor's corruption indictment at the direction of Trump's Department of Justice. So you're saying that they're not concerned about that?
Yeah. Blatantly obvious that they don't care about it, right? But
it blows my mind, and so I don't know what the answer is. Like you said, I agree that they should, do what the DEA did, but then follow through. Ask your members, who they feel they should endorse. But you're paying into your dues. Part of it is for a political action fund, right? So you're paying into that. So you're paying your union to evaluate the best candidate and endorse them for you as your representative. So
I don't know. John said you can pull out of that by requesting it through your union.
Yeah, he said that on the show. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, if you can, then I would agree with it. Enough people. If enough people do it in a particular union, the union's going to see, hey, we need to reevaluate this and go in a different direction, because obviously, the unions want to make their own political statements, because they are a lot involved in the politics of everything. That's what you want the unions to be involved in. But I think that if you can do that, I would recommend it. I would say, and I said it in the group chat when John and Eric were talking about it, don't withdraw completely from your union, because you don't want to stop all dues. Okay, because if you stop all dues, you end up losing your representation for GO15s, which is General Order 15 interrogations. You would have to get your own attorney, and you also have to be careful. Some of that money goes into annuity, which when you retire, you're able to take some of that money out. So you don't want to completely withdraw from the unions. Years ago, I don't know if you remember, Ron, there was guys from MetLife that came around and said, withdraw from the unions, put your money in this insurance policy, and you'll make more and you make more, which was total BS.
Yep.
Because I did it too. I went out for a year, and then I said, you know what, this sounds totally obscure, and I'm going to make much more money in the union. You're making 8%, which I still think's a Ponzi scheme, but I don't know where anybody's getting 8% over the course of forever. But you got to stay within your Your thing, the system Unfiltered says you can also lose some of your medical benefits. So you got to be careful. I don't, don't withdraw completely from the union. But if you are able to, what John said, if you're able to withdraw from the political action, committees or whatever that they're giving their money to, I would recommend that. And then they can reevaluate it and they can readjust it.
Right. I agree. And the way Eric talks about that is, the money that you're paying into the dues, you can actually find your dental and optical coverage for yourself, which is what you get from the union. You get dental and optical coverage from the union. So, reinvest your money into your own plan. I don't know. I haven't looked into that myself. So, I don't know. What else is going on out there? Because we're an hour and 6 minutes in. We ran a little long-winded. Go figure. I went long-winded in the first topic, and we want to get into the main topic. We're an hour and 6 minutes in, so let's make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, and notifications. Help us with the algorithms. Get this going. What else is going on the NYPD before we get into the lawsuit?
Well, real quick, John and Eric had touched on it a little bit, like breaking news, that they had some information that somebody from the aviation unit, aka CO, Winston Faison, had ended up taking the training helicopter, which is the Bell 407. And I have to give kudos to Jimmy Cohn, because Jimmy Cohn did a great job. Normally there's 3 412s Bell helicopters. Those are the air, sea, and rescue helicopters. And then they have the regular patrol helicopters. So there's a total of 7 helicopters. But Jimmy Cohn was smart enough to get a Bell 407 and use it as a training helicopter. And the reason you want to do that is because you don't want to take the other helicopters and take pilots up to train them in it, and then have maintenance time on that particular helicopter, because it costs a lot. The maintenance is a amazing operation. They take apart that whole engine. I don't even know how they do it. You'll walk in, the whole engine's gone. But apparently he had a few hard landings with that. The training helicopter is what I'm hearing. Anytime there's an incident like a hard landing, the FAA is supposed to be notified and is supposed to do an investigation. And the reason they do that investigation is to prevent it and to assess the damage on the helicopter. So what I'm being told is the FAA was notified. Now, I don't know if they were notified. Somebody dropped a dime on it. But the notification was made, and the FAA came to Floyd Bennett Field, and they were allowed to come on the base. And I'm hearing that Faison was extremely mad, as well as people in SOD were mad that they allowed the FAA on base to do this investigation. And that was beyond my belief. It's like, well, that's their job, right? That's the FAA's job to do that investigation. And on top of that, Floyd Bennett Field is federal property. NYPD is just a tenant there. So you don't really have any authority to say you can't come on the base. And it's a federal investigation. And why wouldn't you want it? Well, I'll tell you why you want it, because sometimes, depending on the pilot, there might be something put on their record and stuff. So they don't want that. So they kind of bury it. But this is another example of somebody, especially here's this he's the CO, right? Has a level of integrity and do the right thing and set an example. What example do you set if you have a hard landing? So what? You're training on a helicopter. So what? And you have a hard landing. Okay, that's why you have a training helicopter. I mean, yeah, should you be better at it? Absolutely. And people don't even understand that there's a flight simulator down at Floyd Bennett Field. It's like a giant video game. I mean, it's pretty cool. If you're ever down there for one of the events, and the aviation guys will let you go in there, it's pretty cool. You literally feel like you're flying a helicopter. But train on that too. So I mean, listen, it to me, it's a gap in integrity. It just kind of stamps the same thing that's been going on throughout this administration, that this kind of accepted. And believe me, you don't want this to happen. If something's bad and something needs to be fixed, then fix it. So I think there's more to come. I know that 3 guys already being interviewed, Geo 15. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But you know, to me, if I was the PC or whatever, I think Faison would need to find a new position. You know. So, but that's what I've been hearing. I mean, it's a sad state of affair because I always held the aviation unit guys in the highest level because they're professional and they go through a lot of training. When it's not training at Floyd Bennett Field, they go down to Texas in the Bell helicopter and they train down there. I mean, they are the top law enforcement and aviation, in my opinion. And this puts a little black eye on them, and it shouldn't be. And especially when it's from the CO, who represents the men and women. You got to remember, when you're a CO, you represent the men and women. You want to lead the best way you can, and to me, that's not a great way to lead. So that's what I got so far. I mean, have you ever been up in aviation, Ron? You ever fly up or?
I have.
Mhm.
I remember as a police officer in narcotics going up for my first ride. And, you know, when you were doing a search warrant, if you didn't have access to the rear of a building because of, you know, logistics, you just can't get to the back and you need it for safety reasons, you could put in a request and you get approved to go up in the helicopter and they take you up and you can get some aerial reconnaissance. Now, I guess CAS would send up a drone, which would make sense. And I'm not even saying that in, you know, to be facetious. It's a good use for the drones now where you could send a drone up to take aerial photographs as they go by and get this information, but they didn't do that. So I go down to Floyd Bennett and they introduce me, you know, you gotta put on the vest, the whole 9 yards in case you go down, right? So we go up and it's a little weird the first time you take off in a helicopter, you know? So I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool, right? So like, all right, you ready? You got your camera ready? So I'm like, yeah, I got my narco camera. I'm ready to go. They put this helicopter on the side on a turn so that I could take a picture at the side. I felt my heart was gone. It wasn't even in my throat. It fell out of my throat. It was on the floor. I got so scared because they put the helicopter over so I could take pictures, you know? I don't even know if I got good pictures, to be honest. It was one of the scariest things in my life. The guys were laughing their ass off. But then I did go back later in my career and, you know, was able to see the city from a different view as an executive up in one of the helicopters.
No,
But,
they love to mess with you. When I was doing the rappelling course, you have to rappel out of the helicopter. So the doors open and you're tied in, you know, you're all tied into the thing. And then when you're ready to, the crew chief will let you out. But they put the same thing. They put the helicopter on the side. Now I have the door open. Like, and they were like looking to see how I was going to react. You know, they like to see, can you take it? Can you see how far can they go before you say, all right, you know, I'm good. But yeah, no, they're really good. And I agree with Mike Fried. It was my favorite place. You go in there, you could make rain in the simulator.
yeah.
You could when you crashed, you know, it was pretty cool. So
It's interesting because I was there for that too in the hangar, right? People are like, it's a TV screen, you know, it's a movie screen. You really get locked in.
yeah,
And you're right. Your body is moving. It's a very strange thing that you really. I guess it's like that virtual reality, right? People put those goggles on. You see it on the TikTok feeds or the you know, the YouTube shorts and everything. The funny videos of people doing crazy things with the virtual reality glasses. I've never put them on, but like they're afraid to walk because they're wearing these glasses. Yeah, it's weird how, you know, you can trick your mind.
You know what? It's funny you said that because virtual reality, my son had virtual reality. I put the goggles on and it's a shooting game, right? So I'm trying to walk up the steps. I take a step and I fall on the floor because He's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I was going up the steps." I said, "No, you're supposed to stand still and just kind of walk up with the virtual reality." I'm like actually moving. So yeah, they laughed and they cracking up with that one. But yeah, with the simulator, same thing. You can feel your stomach and stuff. It's pretty wild. If you on usually if they do like REMA, the Retired Emergency Man Association, and there's things. If you ever down the Floyd Bennett Field, anybody in the chats down there, and you're on at one of those events, they usually open that up and let the kids go in and stuff. It's pretty cool.
All right, so let's acknowledge Hassan. Good
There you
evening,
go,
Chief
Hassan.
Inspector.
Thank you, sir.
You guys are real heroes. Please address the rumors from a confirmed source that Sal drinks French onion soup through a straw. Enjoy real Italian espresso from Mo. Thank you, Mo. I know I saw that today. I don't know where you're getting this stuff from. You're on fire today, and I saw that you were in the chat with that earlier today on John's show, John and Eric's show. So thank you for that. We appreciate it. All right, let's get into the main topic because we ran long. And it's really unprecedented that the ex-NYPD Interim Police Commissioner is suing the department, alleging a criminal enterprise. What I find interesting about this suit, right? Normally when you see a lawsuit, someone is saying that they want to be compensated for something that was done to them. There are things in here that he is alleging were done to him and that he, was harmed with, but he's laying out the entire administration's quote unquote, criminal enterprise that he's alleging from a lot of different sources, because he wasn't there for a lot of it that he's alleging in the lawsuit. He wasn't a member of the NYPD. It happened before. He mentions Commissioner Sewell and things that he was put through. Again, it's alleged because Keyshawn Sewell has never come forward with anything explaining any disagreements that she's had with the mayor or her real reason for leaving the NYPD. Whether that'll ever come up in any depositions in anybody's cases, I don't know. But I found that quite interesting. It's a very long read, 254 pages, right? Some repetition in there, but to follow it and go through it, it's really tough. Marlon says that what's really unprecedented anymore in this administration. I understand. But what I'm saying is usually with a suit, you're talking about yourself, right? He's alleging a RICO enterprise. And he's laying out all the allegations that have been made over the entire administration, whether it's from prior lawsuits, prior investigations by the feds, current lawsuits that are out there from the 4 retired chiefs that just were put out. There's information, regarding those lawsuits. He talks about Commissioner Sewell. He talks about Commissioner Caban. He talks about Commissioner Tisch. But so I find it very interesting, this type of lawsuit. I don't know what the outcome can come from this. He's trying to make it read like an indictment. But I will say this, that the things that he's alleging in this lawsuit is pretty much everything that's been said and been talked about through the quote unquote rumor mill. It's all been highly documented on the Finest Unfiltered. I don't think there's anything in there that I haven't heard in the past from John and Eric and Sal from their shows, and Marlon. These are things that have been spoken about throughout the entire job. And now recently, you had the 4 chiefs that made their allegations, but they were saying how they were personally egregious, right? And this one is different. He's laying out a criminal enterprise, I guess, from his federal experience, and working with the Joint Task Force. And again, he does have NYPD experience or knowledge prior to his PC interim spot, because he did work with the Joint Task Force. So he worked with a lot of detectives and supervisors in the NYPD. But what's your initial thoughts on this?
Well, I think Donlan watches the finest Unfiltered. I think everything that's in that major 250-page lawsuit is everything that, like you just said, that's been spoken on this podcast. That John and Eric and Marlon and Sal. I think you and I have even touched on a few things, and he's taken excerpts from each of these podcasts and put it in a major document. But that's okay. I mean, I can see what he's saying, but I agree with you. I think that if you look in the past, most chiefs, or I've never seen a PC sue anybody, the mayor or anybody else. I've never seen that. So that is the oddity to me. Chiefs that get pushed out of the job. I mean, Bratton pushed people out because of their age. He came up with that 55-25 or whatever he did, and they sued. He pushed out. People were pushed out because the department was going in a different direction. People were moved from their prestigious 3-star spots to a 3-star spot that was not as prestigious anymore. Some would consider. I didn't consider, but some would consider a demotion. Right? It's like you're in a high level position, and now all of a sudden you're in your 3-star, buried somewhere that you're not even going to be part of any of the administrative. So I think there's a lot in there, and I think that I think his lawsuit probably has merit on the way he was. I mean, if you look at some, I'll go through it, but some of the ways he was pushed to the side, where he was not part of the plan, part of the things that went on with the department. It can see that they were making him just a figurehead, and they weren't looking for him to do anything really what we normally consider a police commissioner would do, and have full control. Like we always speak about Ray Kelly, right? Ray Kelly, micromanager. You knew he was a micromanager, and he did the job, and you could do that. I'll go back to the last thing I'll say before I throw it back to you is Donlan. The problem, I feel, although he had some intimate knowledge of the NYPD, he did work with the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force. He did work for the lower funding. Got funding for the Lower Manhattan Security Initiative, which is the LMSI, the Ring of Steel, under Commissioner Kelly. But he doesn't have that corporate knowledge. And I mean, Tish has it. She's been in those executives meetings. I've seen her at the PC briefings, so she had some of that. But I always go back where I think the guy, the boots on the ground, works their way up to the top, knows every level, knows what to expect, knows everything that's going on. Unfortunately for him, he came in and didn't know things that were going on and had to learn, and he was subjected to trust people that he probably shouldn't have trusted.
Yeah, I mean, but just before we get into all the allegations, I do want to mention that, of course, as seems to be the case, where in the past, anytime there was any kind of open litigation, right? What's the company line? We don't discuss open litigation, right?
Right.
And we make no comments. But this administration, every time somebody sues, they try to discredit them.
And that's what the legal bureau or the corp counsel will tell you.
Right, exactly. But the mayor goes out, and Tariq Shepard goes out and says that he didn't have mental acuity, right? So John Scola, who's Donlan's attorney, puts out a press release, and again, this was breaking during John and Eric's show the other day, right? That he's now filed a $10 million notice of claim against the city for exposing a malicious campaign to smear a federal whistleblower and protect a criminal enterprise in the city hall and NYPD. The days after Donlan filed a sweeping RICO and civil rights lawsuit detailing corruption, fraudulent promotions, obstruction of justice, Adams and Shepard retaliated with a coordinated public character assassination. They say coordinated because they use the exact same verbiage. Right? Shepard went on live television, blatantly lied, falsely claiming Donlan's phones were seized by the FBI and accused him of suffering from cognitive issues. Adams took it further and publicly declaring Donlan he was mentally not fit and claimed he was fired for not taking a mental acuity test. So right there, I mean, again, that's been the MO of this administration, is to attack, so to speak, the accusers.
Yeah, the reputation. They're trying to crush his reputation.
Not wait until you go to court and then try to discredit people. They're trying to do it in the court of public opinion. But as far as this lawsuit, there's just so much. Like Eric and John started doing a breakdown of it and realized there's no way. It would have to be an episode, like he said, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get into it. They went into depth on Tariq Shepard. We're going to speak about some of the things with Tariq Shepard. And there's so many other things. And the thing that hit me the most was, and it was in the title of the show today, was basically the blatant insubordination of the upper echelon towards the position of the police commissioner. Because remember, you don't have to respect the person because they're an outsider and they're fed, but you have to respect the position that they hold, right? So you have to respect the rank. And I go back to Band of Brothers, right? When Captain Sobel comes walking by and Major Winters is sitting in the Jeep at the end of the war, and he walks by and he goes, Captain Sobel, he goes, Major Winters, but he doesn't salute. He goes, Captain Sobel, you salute the rank, not the man. It makes him salute him. Because you have to respect the rank. You don't have to respect the person. And the blatant disregard for the police commissioner from what's alleged in this lawsuit just totally blows my mind. And he says it right from the beginning, right? Throughout his time working in the interim police commissioner, Donlan's orders are disobeyed and ignored by defendants Casella, Madry, Shell, Daughtry, Shepard, Gerber, Saraceno, and Marino. As previously stated, the above defendants were essentially in control of the entire NYPD, in conjunction with Adams. From the time Donlan's appointment as the interim police commissioner in September of 24 until Donlan's retaliatory termination as police commissioner in November. So he was only there for 2 months, right? But it started right away, right? It started right away. As soon as the police commissioner comes in, what's the first thing they do, right? They get assigned a security detail because they have to be shepherded around. They have, they get a full-blown, one sergeant, one lieutenant, a few sergeants, 15 detectives. They get around-the-clock coverage. And what happened right away? Right? As soon as he assumed the post, unbeknownst to Donlan, Defendant Shepard and Saraceno called a meeting on Donlan's security team. Donlan wasn't present for the meeting, nor did he authorize it. At the meeting, Defendant Shepard made it clear he was in charge, not Donlan, as a police commissioner of the NYPD. At the meeting, Defendant Shepard and Saraceno threatened the approximately 15 members of the service that they were not to follow the orders of Donlan. I mean, where do you get the gall to do that? Right? But because they've been working with impunity because they were covered by the mayor.
Yeah.
The whole time.
That's where they get the balls from. They get it from the mayor. Right? I mean, that's it. They're getting their power from the mayor. They know that they got the mayor in the back pocket. So that's why they're gonna use their power, and maybe the mayor told them, think about it, right? John and Eric spoke about it. Terry Tobin was going to be the chief of staff, and for whatever reason, they didn't want the mayor and the Madry and those didn't want that as the chief of staff. Why? Because probably Terry Tobin, who I know very well, is a very good person, probably would have gave her allegiance to the police commissioner like she should have, like it's expected, right? Like you just said, when the PC comes in, you're supposed to show the respect to the position. And she probably wouldn't have been the eyes and ears to the mayor and going back of everything that's going on, you know. And just to go back to that lawsuit, right, the defamation lawsuit, it's funny that you can say that, you know, throw out that he had cognizant problems and you know, things where he wasn't really of good sound and mind, but they put him in a position under the mayor's administration in the
After he left
in
the
public
NYPD.
safety. After he says he's not, they're saying he wasn't competent enough to be a police commissioner because he shows signs of cognizant uh, uh, diminishing capabilities. But then they put him in a position in the mayor's office, literally under the mayor. I mean, it just shows how much they're BS and like you said, they're pushing people down, and that's what they do. They go right after you, and if they say it enough, I think, what was it, Bronx? Somebody said it. You had just put it up that you know, if you put it, the administration has no respect for the rank that they never earned it themselves. You know, they don't have any respect for any rank because their rank was just given to them. It was just thrown to them. They didn't earn it. It was all through nepotism, and you know, and they brought everybody in. So they figure they maintain that, right? They don't have to be respectful because they know who the mayor is, and the mayor's going to take care of them, and they're giving the mayor the information. It's I don't know. It's craziness.
And you know, we could talk about, you know, promotions, right? And I was blown away, right? The promotions were, and we heard this, but now it's coming directly from the former police commissioner, right? That Banks and Pearson operated as political enforcers within the NYPD, routinely overriding or sidelining the police commissioner's promotional decisions. The police commissioner has ultimate say on anybody getting promoted at any rank, right? Command assignments and disciplinary outcomes were no longer made by the commissioner as required by the city charter administrative code, right? They were flowing through the mayor's inner circle. Under this unlawful scheme, promotions below the rank of captain, such as detective second grade and first grade, special assignment for sergeant, and lieutenant special assignment, were reviewed and finalized by Pearson. Promotions at the rank of captain and above, including deputy inspector, deputy chief, bureau chiefs, were controlled by Banks. So, I mean, that is, he's police commissioner in name only. He has no authority, right? And not only are they the ones making the selections, but they're changing the names. Officers whose names and ranks Donlan approved and forwarded on 3 separate promotion lists, because there were 3 separate promotions during his tenure, was systematically removed without his knowledge or consent by defendants Madry, Shepard, Marino, right? And most disturbingly, with the approval of Adams. The men and women whom Donlan recognized and approved for promotion had earned their promotions through their tireless dedication, protecting the public, saving lives, solving complex cases, making critical arrests, and preventing future crimes. Yet their hard-won recognition was callously discarded by defendant Adams and the NYPD defendants. So he's going to promote people, right? And from what I'm understanding, he actually, from even reading it, the lawsuit, he's alleging he notified people. Imagine getting that phone call. Hey, you're getting promoted on Friday. And then you're hearing it from the police commissioner. Shit, I'm flying my mother in from North Carolina. I'm having my kids take off from school and from work or whatever the case may be. We're going to have a great time. We're going to go out to dinner afterwards. Blah, 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 blah. This is great. I'm getting recognized for my hard work and dedication. The finest message comes down. Ron Leyson's nowhere to be found. Wait a minute. The police commissioner told me this wasn't a rumor. I didn't hear it from Vinny in the hallway, who heard something on the elevator or thought he saw it on a piece of paper on somebody's desk. The police commissioner called me and told me I'm getting promoted. Could you imagine?
Listen, that's so funny you say that. So I can't. You knew promotions were coming down. So on Wednesdays, that's when you had your phone like this.
Yeah.
You and you'd see if all of a sudden there's I mean, at the time I think it was a 646 number or so, a private number. You knew, but yeah, I mean, I remember, years ago it was Commissioner Wench, right? He was the one
Right.
that would call you,
The
and
wench will call you.
you'd get a call and say, "Hold on, stand by for Commissioner Wench." You get your blood would start pumping. You'd be like, "Oh my God." Yeah, I couldn't imagine getting that call. And like you said, and you only have 2 days, right? You only have 2 days to make the preparation. You got
Right.
to bring people in. You got to worry about parking at 1PP, which is a nightmare. You got to worry about, you got to be there earlier because you got to turn your shield in, and you got to get you sign your papers. So you got to be there earlier. Then you got to hope somebody's bringing your family in. It's a whole rigmarole. It's probably one of the, it's a great day. Promotion days are great days, but it's a nerve-wracking day for the promotee because you got to worry about all this stuff to get everybody down here together. And then after it's over, then you finally are. Thank God I made it. But yeah, imagine getting the call and then the fine is coming down, which is the notification system throughout the department, and your name's not on there. You're making a call, right? You got to be like, what happened? And they were doing this. We know for a fact that a sheet comes down with the promotee names, and it's signed by the police commissioner.
Right.
And we've seen it. I've seen either a stamp and then an initial by the police commissioner or the signature by the police commissioner, and that's going to go over to personnel, right? So that they can send out the finest message. So somewhere, I guess so I'm saying the chief of staff, right, probably said, "Give me that," or the acting chief of staff says, "Give me that piece of paper." No, 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 and then sends his own piece of paper. It's like, it's diabolical that somebody would even do that and have the audacity to override the police commissioner of the city of New York.
All right. Well, do you want to get into a very specific case of a promotion that wasn't authorized by the police commissioner, or do you want to talk about the marathon first? Which one?
I would like to talk about, well, I think he was already, I think we'll talk about the promotion, because I would like to know how to do that, and I felt sad that I didn't do that.
Well, all right. Let me pull that up. So, yeah, it's just defendant Shepard forged the revised list by unlawfully using Donlan signature stamp. So this is what we're talking about, right? So
Yeah.
after the changes were made, Marino, who worked as in the office of the police commissioner, right? He was in the office,
Mm-hmm.
and supposedly he was the keeper of the stamp, right? And he was allowing Tariq Shepard to come in and use this stamp without the commissioner's knowledge to change the orders of who's going to get promoted, right? On the orders of Banks, Pearson, Madry, and Shepard. This is alleged throughout the entire 250 pages, right? So without his knowledge, it should be noted Donlan personally observed the promotion memo with his signature stamp on it, signifying that Shepard was promoted to a 3-star chief. Defendant Shepard's actions constitute multiple crimes, including forgery, falsification of business records, grand larceny, and official misconduct, right? And he's saying that because he is now going to get paid more, right? So you got a guy who is the deputy commissioner of public information, right? He's acting as the chief of staff for the police commissioner, not by the police commissioner's choice,
No.
planted by the mayor. So he has control, right? So he's now designated as the deputy commissioner of public information. He's never promoted, he's never made the chief of staff. Now, for those who aren't very familiar, the chief of staff, as you just mentioned, Joe Wench was a civilian. It's a civilian title, holding whatever director or administrative position, deputy commissioner, whatever the case may be. But it's a civilian title. At some point, they made it a uniform 3-star title. So through the years, it has been both a uniform as well as a civilian position. Currently, under Commissioner Tisch, the chief of staff is a civilian. So, you know, his assertion, right, that he was a deputy commissioner of public information. The deputy commissioner holds an assimilated rank of 3-star chief, right? It's an assimilated rank. You're not a 3-star uniform member. You are technically a civilian. You're on leave from your uniform position to be a civilian deputy commissioner. They didn't make him a 3-star chief of public information. He was a deputy commissioner. He was made a deputy commissioner 4 days after he was made a 1-star chief, by the way.
Imagine that. 4
He
days.
was never, as claimed in the lawsuit, an assistant commissioner, an assistant chief, until after he was removed from his deputy commissioner of public information position. So he went from deputy inspector, skipped over inspector to deputy chief, was made deputy commissioner, and then removed back down to a 2-star chief. He was never a 3-star chief, right? According to official department records and a lot of other things, right? Including the mayor's own statements. The mayor's own statements. Right? Shepard was asked by Donlan, who promoted him, advised the defendant Adams was the one who promoted him to 3-star chief. Donlan spoke in person with defendant Adams and Madry over defendant Shepard stealing his police commissioner's signature stamp and promoting himself to bureau chief. Defendant Adams informed Donlan that he, defendant Adams, did not authorize the promotion of defendant Shepard. So right there, Shepard is telling the police commissioner, oh, the mayor promoted me. The mayor's saying, I didn't promote him. Madry is saying, I don't know anything about it. He says in an interview, you know, that he was already a deputy commissioner, which is a simulated rank of 3-star chief, so he just wore a uniform when he was in that position. That's not a fair statement. There's two totally different things. And I don't know. I tried to find it out, and I know Eric had asked it at the end of the episode. I don't know the pay grade difference between a deputy commissioner and a uniform 3-star chief. I don't know if anybody has ever found that information.
I actually did look it up. There are similar salaries. The problem is there's a variation between it, like depending on when they're hired and stuff like that. So it's not a set thing, but there is similarities to it. So, but listen, I'll always say this is like when Chief Whedon, right, when he was a 3-star chief and he would go on vacation and he would have to put somebody as the acting CO of the Special Operations Division. So since I was the XO, he would designate me as the acting CO. He would do a UF 49, which is a Universal Form 49, up to the chief, all the way up to the PC's office, saying that I will be on annual vacation from such and such date, and Deputy Chief Rob Lukach will be the acting CO of the Special Operations Division. Now, I didn't know that I could go to the equipment section and buy 3 stars and put it on my uniform and walk around, because that's what he did. He was the acting chief of staff. That doesn't, and I didn't know I could go buy a dupe shield and put Whedon's shield on my chest either. I didn't know these things, but apparently this is it's a new policy and procedure that once you're in acting, you what do you do with 2 shields? Do you put 2 holes on your right side so that you have shield on both sides? And then when they have a question, here's the thing, can the chief of staff ask the deputy commissioner of public information a question, and does he answer himself? How does that work?
Well, now that's all in good fun, but the reality is that documents were forged, right? Put through official channels. I don't know who swore him in, if John Benoit, who's the chief personnel, actually swore him in, or if there was ever a swearing in ceremony, right? Because you're supposed to take an oath of office for every rank.
Yes.
Right. And I don't know who did that, but he had a chief of staff 3-star shield. He wore the uniform.
Wait, where did he get that shield, Ron? Where did he get that shield?
Because the paperwork, the official paperwork, was forged.
When you got promoted to deputy inspector and inspector, where'd you get your shield?
From personnel. They gave it to you
up on the stage, right?
That's right. So that's what I'm saying. Somebody swore him in and gave it to him.
Or did he just go and take it?
You know,
did he go downstairs to personnel or the shield desk and say, "Hey, give me the chief of staff's shield"?
You know, these are all questions that may come up in depositions, may not come up in depositions. I don't know, but there he is wearing it, and he says it's because he was already a 3-star as a deputy commissioner. You want to let's take a gander at that interview that he had. Whoops. This is my first time doing this, so bear with me.
Serious allegations against you that I want to give you an open opportunity to respond. The first of which in this lawsuit is that you, and I'm looking off so I read it correctly, I represent it to you correctly, is that you orchestrated your own promotion by falsely using his stamp and representing that he had authorized it. Your response to that, if you could, please.
I think Commissioner Donlan and the department knows that that's actually false. I didn't need to falsely promote myself. I was already a deputy commissioner before he came into the department. Deputy commissioner holds the title of a 3-star ranking. When he came in, I was asked to do a different function temporarily, which was chief of staff, which at the time I wore a uniform. There's no promotion there. I was a deputy commissioner. You could argue that we've put 3-star chiefs under deputy commissioners before in the NYPD.
It's crazy.
Right. So yeah, that's not a true statement.
No, he's making up his own rules.
It's not a true statement. It's a simulated rank, just like, right? You have an SPAA has a simulated rank of a sergeant, right? In certain situations, they can actually supervise a police officer. A principal administrative aide has a simulated rank of a lieutenant, right? And can, in certain administrative functions, oversee uniformed personnel in sergeants and lieutenants. So they're given a simulated rank, right? So it's not a real rank. It's not, you're not a uniformed member of the service anymore once you're a deputy commissioner. And in all his official paperwork, he's a deputy commissioner of public information. And even I'll jump ahead a little bit here, and let me see if I got the right one.
Let me just interject real quick, Dan. So here's the thing: you're the chief of housing, okay, with 3-star spot, and now the police commissioner says, "I'm going to make you chief of patrol." What do? You hand in your shield, and you go up on the stage, and you swear an oath to that particular position, just like you said earlier. So it's not a lateral transfer. It's not a lateral promotion. You can't do that on your own. So what he's saying is complete false. You can't do that. It's not acceptable. And absolutely, does it have the equivalent rank of a 3-star? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean you're a 3. So what, next week, tomorrow, you're the chief of patrol? No, you can't do that. It has to come down through the orders. It has to come down through your give your sworn a statement to the city and say that I will faithfully uphold the position of, and then you give the position. So he can't just make that up. He just did it on his own. If he's telling you in that interview he's trying to justify it, it's completely unjustifiable. It's not done. It's not done that way, and he's totally off cue, and he's just trying to justify his, like you said, illegal actions. Like he took a civil service rank that it was not granted to him.
Exactly. And this is an article that's related to the marathon incident that we'll talk about, which is just like the epitome of insubordination and probably illegal. But I'll just go to this is a statement from the NYPD talking about the incident. I'll hit it again after. But the last paragraph, he is acting chief of staff and deputy commissioner of public information, the department said. So he's his official title is deputy commissioner of public information, but he was acting as the chief of staff. He wasn't sworn in as the chief of staff. At any time, at any point, he allegedly used the police commissioner's rubber stamp, forged the promotion that went down. Somebody asked before, where was the finest message? Never came out. I had, people had queried the finest system. He never came down on any orders. So it's all done where paperwork was pushed through, and he called it stolen valor, whatever the case may be, but he was never promoted. And, let's talk about it, right? So you want to talk anything more about that?
No, I just, I mean, I think we hit pretty hard. I mean, we know what he did was wrong. So, I mean, you can't do that, because you know what happens tomorrow? 1,000 other guys move, as soon as they're designated acting, or you have 5 chiefs of patrol tomorrow. Hey, I'm going to be the chief of patrol, so it's crazy.
And thank you to class of 8311, 999 to the show. Another great show. Enjoying the insight from you guys. We appreciate it. That we try to give that insight that people don't get. It's a different view. Listen, this topic's been covered extensively by Eric and John very well. Sal on his show, we're given a different perspective from our executive experience and some insight of some of the things that do go on in the upper levels that the people on the boots on the ground don't get to see and hear from. And that's the whole premise behind the show, is to give you that executive perspective from our, decades of experience in the executive corps. So we appreciate that, 8311. We appreciate you.
Yeah, also, Ron, the chat's going wild. I mean, a lot of great comments and stuff. I know we can't get to all of them, but they're really good stuff. I was cracking up with one with KB. He was talking about when you used to do the fake finest messages, and you would transfer people, and they really thought they were getting transferred. It was hilarious. I remember typing the fake finest message to promote or transfer people, and we never let them leave the command. It was so funny because guys would believe it, Yeah. So,
it's a different time, but this is some serious stuff. This is legitimate.
Oh, this is not fake. This is not fake stuff. This is real.
Not fake. This is legitimate stuff. He promoted himself without authorization, then tried to say the mayor did it. Then the mayor's like, I ain't going for that one. Even the mayor wasn't backing him up on that, But, the ultimate demise, right, was, this photo op right here, where he basically, him and Kaz basically squeeze, with the NYPD running club at the New York City Marathon, they squeeze him out. They squeeze him out of the photo in an ultimate show of disrespect. But it gets even worse, and it's caught on video, and it's not really alleged. It's caught on video, and it's been highly discussed that they got into a verbal altercation. And now it's being alleged that Tariq Shepard threatened, I'm going to effing kill you. And that Madry had to physically intervene so that he was posturing up and going towards Commissioner Donlan, all in public in the daytime, and he was physically restrained by Chief Madry at that time. That's the ultimate show of disrespect. Listen, I've always said insubordination is like the worst thing, right? That anybody could have an argument. You could question any order or direction given, but never question the authority. And especially if you do it in public, even if your argument or your question is correct, if you argue and get disrespectful and insubordinate, you lose 1,000%. So even if you were right in your argument, you become wrong because of the way you handle the situation. Now here, there's obvious animosity between the two. There's been allegation after allegation after allegation after allegation of insubordination, total disregard of directions given by the police commissioner to the executive staff of the NYPD, doing the end around, right? Doing his end around, avoiding the chain of command and going directly to the mayor instead of going to the police commissioner on matters of the department, all things like that. This, you're getting physical. And he alleges that he instructed Madry to notify IAB, which was never done, right? And then the official statement of the job winds up coming out. And let me get these two things up here. So the official statement of the job. Well, hold on.
And what the mayor say? The mayor said you guys should be working together, right? That's
right.
Yeah.
This morning, in the midst of preparations for the marathon, there was a brief disagreement between two NYPD executives, not the police commissioner, two executives, that was witnessed by members of the public. The matter was promptly discussed and resolved, the NYPD spokesman said in the statement. The leaders of the NYPD are passionate about their work, and it is that commitment and drive that helps us keep New Yorkers safe every day. We are incredibly proud of the work that every member of the department is doing to ensure that the extraordinary marathon goes smoothly and safely for the runners and spectators.
That's a dysfunctional family that you're trying to justify violence. That's all it is. There's no need for it. Especially you're talking about pushing and shoving the police commissioner, the highest in the police department. That is total disrespect, and there's no way that should have been done, and it should have been addressed. Somebody in the chat earlier said that would have been a suspension and a transfer immediately. I mean, I don't care who the mayor is. You're going to do that. If I'm the police commissioner, you do that to me. And like you said, there's a time when you can get never physical. It should never be physical, but you can get loud with me. I'll accept it, but it should be in private. I'll accept your, in public. That's it. Here's the thing. Like, I used to have guys I came on the job were friends with, my partners, and they would say, hey, inspector, hey, chief, and when they were around other cops. And I say, listen, dude, you know me as long as why wouldn't you just call me Rob? And they're like, no, because we're in front of other cops. I'm going to show you I'm going to respect you for that. Listen, I know you're Rob, and I know you're an idiot. No, I'm just kidding. And but they respected the rank in front of other people, and that's what should have been done. If Shepard or Madry or anybody else had a problem there, hey, commissioner, can we talk to you back at your office later on? And you know what that picture, unfortunately, that picture reminds me of? That reminds me of a Where's Waldo, right? The old where you had to find. There was a big picture of all these people, and you had to circle Waldo, and you found him. That poor guy was shoved out. If that was Kelly would have been in the front row with the runners from the marathon, right? He would have been right in there, and those two other guys would have been in the background, and that's the way it should have been, because he is the police commissioner. I've seen it where they where they give the awards out. I've been at the end of the marathon where the FDNY and unfortunately FDNY usually win a lot. They got really good runners. But when the FDNY and NYPD are there, there's a group picture. And you know what? It's the fire commissioner and the police commissioner. They're holding the trophy together, and then one gives it to the other. And that's the way it should be. Respect, you know?
It's funny you say about a dysfunctional family, because the mayor's official statement, right? The perceived pick this led to a shouting match between Donlan and Shepard, whose sources had said be physically separated. This is from the New York Daily News, or the Post, right? Physically separated by the NYPD Chief of Department, Jeffrey Maddrey. Mayor Eric Adams downplayed the public fracas, which unfolded in full view of marathon spectators, as akin to a fight between a married couple. There you go. Just like you said, right? Just because you have an argument with your spouse, your child, your business partner, doesn't mean you don't love them, he said Monday during his weekly off-topic news conference. If that was a signature of you don't care for the other person in your life, then we are all in trouble. Absolutely 1,000,000% have to say that that is not true. That is not the case. This is a paramilitary organization. We say that we're family. We're like family. It's our NYPD. It's our blue family. Absolutely 100%. It is a paramilitary organization. You do not have the right or ability to be disrespectful, confrontational, insubordinate, and threatening to a superior, let alone the damn police commissioner.
Hey, Ron, if I family, police department, definitely family, home family. If I pushed my wife, I'm a dead man, bro. I'm a dead man.
Forget about it. I don't even want to think about it, right? So, but it's I can't find the words, which is next to impossible for me, right? That the mayor is justifying this and blowing it off as just, what if somebody did that to him?
Good point.
In the public, would it be just passionate exchange because they're passionate about things?
Yeah.
No. He wouldn't allow somebody to disrespect him like that. One of his deputy mayors to disrespect him like that.
Yeah, if Kaz pushed him out of the way.
Even Kaz, as much as he loves Kaz would not get away with that. Kaz would be done tomorrow. It's a paramilitary organization. That just flies in the face. And that was so egregious to me. And that was really the biggest eye-opener to me about how far off the norm that this administration and this NYPD has come. To allow that to happen and nothing to come of it, right? Except now he's being removed down to a 2-star position, okay, from deputy commissioner, which is still a promotion, a uniform promotion, because his last civil service rank was a deputy chief, not an assistant chief.
No. Then he still gets the cash in his time. He still gets all the benefits. He didn't suffer anything really, you know, for his outrageous behavior.
It blows my mind. There you go. Captain, deputy chief to deputy commissioner. He was never an assistant chief. So when he left his deputy commissioner of public information position, his civil service title was deputy chief in August of 23. He was made an assistant chief. Technically, it's a uniform promotion, even though he says that it was alleged out there that he was demoted to assistant chief because he was wearing 3 stars. No, he was never a 2-star. He was never even a 2-star. The whole thing just completely just blows my mind.
Yeah. Do you want to get into, I think Eric had asked about it. Do you want to get into the incident where Donlan's wife was arrested?
Sure. Sure, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, what we know, right? That apparently she was involved in a 3-car collision. I think the car rear-ended her car and forced her into another car. The other that car, I think, believed that she hit, took off. The police respond. I guess they, get your license, registration, insurance. There was an injury, I think. So, and as you know, the police don't respond anymore, right? If there's no injury, so it's normally just exchange your information and you're on your own. But I know, unfortunately, in your case, you had an injury, and the patrol supervisor said he's between tours, and I can't make anybody go out there right now, right? So but
They came
finally
they came
came,
quickly. They did.
and
They
then
changed their tune.
and then I guess she has a lapse in her insurance, which it could happen to anybody, right? Anybody, we know that it could happen, that if you don't pay the insurance, or you didn't get the mail or whatever, they do a lapse on your insurance, and then they send a suspension to your license, right? So that you do it. So I mean, the tragedy of the whole thing is they handcuff her, arrest her. The sergeant takes some phone call, right? I got to take this call.
Yeah.
He takes this call,
This
and
is
they end up bringing her into the precinct.
this is from the lawsuit.
The
right?
lawsuit, yeah.
The sergeant, his name is McDermott, right? He looks down at his phone and says, "Excuse me, I have to take this call." Officer Sue suggests to Miss O'Connor Donlan that she should retrieve her proof of insurance on her phone, because I guess it was coming up as suspended. And she followed directions and retrieved the proof on the phone. McDermott returned from having the phone call with an unknown individual. Sergeant McDermott has changed his demeanor dramatically. As he approached Miss O'Connor Donlan, he started to badger her with questions in a hostile manner regarding her insurance status, and advised that her New York State driver's license was suspended. Now, reading further into the lawsuit and other stuff, it winds up that Commissioner Donlan had a car, gave it to his son in, I believe it was Texas, and still had the New York plates on it. So after he gave it to his son registered the car in that other state. Their policy is, we'll take the car, the plates, we'll destroy the plates, and we'll notify the New York DMV that we took them into our custody and we destroyed the plates. New York State DMV is, if you discontinue insurance, you have, I think, 3 or 5 days, whatever it is, to turn your plates in. And if you don't turn your plates in, they're going to suspend your license, because they're assuming that you're still driving around with license plates and no insurance, as an insurance lapse. So because the out-of-state didn't notify the DMV that they destroyed the plates, New York State DMV no longer has insurance on the car. The car still has the plates registered, and they suspended her license. Okay. All right. Now, he was on the scene. It's later alleged that the sergeant claimed that he didn't know that was Donlan's, the prior police commissioner's wife, and Commissioner Donlan is alleging in his lawsuit that that's not a true statement, because the sergeant was addressing him as sir and commissioner on the scene before he left. Because everything was supposedly good, Donlan left her to just finish out the paperwork or whatever the case may be. Now, it just blows my mind, because, yeah, okay, so she has a suspended license. There is discretion. There's discretion on making certain arrests and writing certain summonses. This wasn't a suspended license due to a failure to pay a fine or anything like that. Summonses that went unanswered that she got for moving violations. It's an administrative oversight, an administrative suspension. Worst case scenario, Mrs. Donlan, could you come back to the station house so we could work this out? And have her come back to the station house. But for the sergeant to say, cuff her, re-cuff her, put her in the back of an RMP, bring her to the station house, then want to put her in the holding cell where she protested, and they finally agreed to put her in the juvie room, but still cuffed her to the wall for an hour and a half. Then gave her some summons. We don't know if it's a DAT or if it was a C summons or a moving summons, or we don't know. Where is
So
the discretion?
So
Where-
yeah, I mean, why can't you just, so a person can voluntarily come with you to make clear, especially since you know, and if he's saying he doesn't know it was the police commissioner's wife, he's full of crap. Because as soon as I'm sure she probably said it, right? She's gonna say, hey, my husband is the
According
retired.
to the suit, she only told them after she spoke to him and he said he was coming. So she then informed them, my husband is the former interim police commissioner and he's on his way here, because she didn't want the cops to be caught off guard when
Right.
Donlan showed up.
And that's
So she didn't
before
try to flex and say, oh, my
Right.
husband is so and so. She didn't
So
tell
then-
him until he was coming.
and that's before she's cuffed and transferred to the precinct. Now think about it. So she gets cuffed and taken to the station house. She goes in front of the desk. There's a log entry. There's a prisoner interview form filled out. There's supposed to be body-worn camera. You're supposed to take your body camera, take it out, turn it around. So you're doing, as you're searching, which I don't believe she should even have been searched, but she was searched. As you're searching the individual, it's all on body-worn camera. So the desk officer knows about it. The patrol supervisor knows about it. And the police officers in the precinct all know about it. And they know that it's the police commissioner's wife at this point. There's notifications made. There's a call to operations, unequivocally, with no doubt. Now, and that notification's made to operations. There's going to be an email. Now, it might not be the email that you and I normally get. Right, so we get shootings, we get hostage barricade information on our cell phones. When Whedon was the CO of operations, he says not every notification should go out to everybody in the department. So he developed a principal only email. So that means 3 stars, 4-star, and above. So that notification had to go out that the police commissioner's wife was being held at the whatever precinct it was, and she was investigated for possible insurance lapse or a suspended license. So in an interview, Tariq Shepard says he knows nothing about that. Now, whether he's the I don't know what position he was in, but he would have got that notification.
He was back at DCPI.
So if he's DCPI, he definitely would have got that notification. So how does he lie about that? That's another one where he just lies and says something that's totally off cuff. There's no way. And there's an electronic thumbprint of everything that we're talking about, right? So look at the log. Let's look at the body-worn camera. All of these things that Donlan's saying is outrageous. This is not how any of us would have respected a former police commissioner's wife, or even family member, or even somebody of our own family members. If I had pulled over Ron Leyson's son and he said I had to suspend the license and this is my dad, all right, just come with us back to the station house and we're going to investigate it. I mean, if it's a grandma and she's 70 years old, I'm not cuffing her either. Okay, you have to show a little respect and have a little common sense. And this, to me, was totally done on purpose to diminish the respect for Donlan and his wife. That's my feeling. And Shepard completely lied about the notification. There's no way he didn't know about it. And Marlon spoke about it earlier too. DCPI puts out all the information on now I think it's on the computer system, right? On the portal. And it gives you every article,
the clippings,
newspapers, DCPI clip. It used to be, remember that big book you'd get and you'd go through it in the morning when you got in, but now it's on the portal. So when I would go to work, I would click on that because you could see everything was every newspaper, whether it's a small newspaper, big newspaper, it's on there, and it had all the articles relative to NYPD. Now him and DCPI, the guys that do that, you're going to tell me he didn't read that?
But also, Rob, it says there that within minutes, he was getting phone calls on his personal cell phone, not even his city cell phone that he still had when he was working for the mayor, right? His personal cell phone on inquiries about it from multiple news organizations within minutes. So I just want to Bobby is correcting me. Shepard's last civil service rank was captain. That is correct. Every
Technically,
rank
yeah.
after that is I said that his last civil service rank was a deputy chief. But yes, his last rank was deputy chief before he went there. So you're right. Civil service wise, he was a captain, as was Rob and I. Our civil service rank is our last civil service exam.
As is Shepard, right? He's a captain acting as an assistant chief. That's how it comes
Actually,
down.
He's on leave from his uniform civil service title. When you become a deputy commissioner or
Oh,
assistant
deputy, yeah,
commissioner,
right. Up to
you
one
actually
chief.
leave the uniform service and become a civilian.
Yeah,
even
I
though,
remember that. Yeah.
Even though he's running around with his polo, his duty pants, and gun belt as a deputy commissioner. You know?
Yeah.
But so, all right. I think, is there any other parts that you want to hit? With 2 hours and 15 minutes, 2 hours and 10 minutes into 2 hours and 15 minutes into the show. There's so much in there. But I mean,
No, I think we hit. I think so. You know, hitting Tariq Shepard was important because he's the one that came right out and tried to defend and deny. So I think that's why it was so important, because he's not
Yeah.
taking any responsibility, and he's like throwing things out like, "Hey, I could do what I was authorized to do that. I was authorized to do that." When you and I know at the executive level, no, you're not authorized to do that. You don't take these things into your own hands. You don't do things to self-promote. You don't do things to deny notifications when we know that notifications were made. So I think that was important. I mean, yeah, is there a lot in that lawsuit? Absolutely. John did a great job, I think, with IA, right? With it reads it out and stuff, and
yeah,
it's long too, but I mean, and some I tell you,
it took me a couple of days.
it does. And I would say if Donlan needs more for his lawsuit, he should continue to watch the podcast, because they were on the money as always. Eric and John, Marlon, Sal, they did a great job.
Yeah, it's good. Listen, we went 2 hours and 17 minutes is deep. You want to do a quick round of Ask an Executive?
Oh yeah, if anybody has anything, sure, we could do a couple questions from the audience.
There's a new segment that we started a few weeks ago, Ask an Executive, where we answer questions from the chat. Now we're always engaged with the chat. Today I'm producing, so I'm trying to stay focused and do a couple other things. I lose track of the chat sometimes, but at this point, we're going to open up the chat real quick to any questions. Don't have to be on topic of today's show, but any kind of question that you want to ask an executive because you didn't have access to an executive, now you do. You have to two executives, deputy chief, a retired and retired inspector. So
Well, I think Hood Mayor NYC, right?
Did you two know the mayor when you made captain? Not personally. I did not. And it took me over 8 years to make my first promotion.
Yeah, I didn't know. I knew Adams because the name was when he develop 100 black in law enforcement. I think he broke off from the Guardians, wasn't he? The one that did that. I think that's how I knew his name, but I didn't know him personally. No.
Oh wait, you know what? I read that wrong. Did we know the mayor when we made captain? If you're asking Hood Mayor, if you're asking if we knew Eric Adams, I did have interactions with Eric Adams when I was a duty captain. He was a lieutenant in the 8-8 precinct, and I was a duty captain in Brooklyn North. I never had any negative interactions with him. He was always inside the station house. doing administrative work, but he always had the answers when you come in and you ask the questions about what's going on, what's your manpower, and any collars in the house or anything like that. He was always smart enough to know to have the answers ready for the boss when the boss comes in. You want to take this one?
This is what, Ron and Rob, have you ever seen a job of this magnitude where the duty captain wouldn't respond to that 53? You know what? That's a great point. JDP 074. I think you want to make that notification. If you're talking about a police commissioner's wife involved in an accident, I think you want to make those notifications. You want to get that word up, and you want to make sure that it's handled respectfully, right? You want to make sure that it's done right. And yeah, absolutely. I would want the desk officer. I mean, usually it was the desk officer's responsibility to make the notification to the duty chief. So, not duty chief, I'm sorry, the duty captain. So if I'm the patrol supervisor, my responsibility is to call the desk. I say, hey, Lou, or the sergeant's on desk, this is what I got. And that's a notification. I mean, I think out of respect for that duty captain, I would have made that call anyway. Even if it's just, you don't have to respond here, but it's just a heads up that this is what we got, because there's going to be a shit storm coming down the road afterwards. So that's what I think. What do you think, Ron? You think the same?
I think on the job notifications were made. That's why the sergeant got phone calls.
Yeah, could be.
And you know what? I wouldn't want to be the captain or the inspector, because there were phone calls made afterwards, according to the suit, of Jimmy McCarthy, who's the CO of the borough, calling up and apologizing, and the CO of the command calling and apologizing, and things like that. So, I think that there were absolutely notifications made, and I think the captain was probably told to stay away and just leave it as is. So Marlon asked, would Tariq have to have had to attend any executive refresher courses upon his promotion to 3-star? There is none. Once you become the captain, that's the last promotional school that you go to. Any discretionary rank above captain, there's no refresher training, there's no training, there's no anything. It's a discretionary promotion to a higher rank, and there's no training for any of all of that.
No, what they usually have is the all-in, where you kind of all the executives from the department go to the police academy and sit and listen to speakers, and you're able to fall asleep in front of a whole crowd of 800 people. So
yeah. Did you ever pull over an executive while on patrol? How did it go? This is how it went. Have a good day, sir. End the conversation. Back in the RMP. Back to patrol. There's no conversation to be had.
How did
it go?
Yeah.
That's how it went. Same thing when I pulled over anybody that I was going to use discretion with. I always told people, don't get involved, don't get engaged. Nothing good can come of it. If you make a determination that you're going to utilize your discretion, not to write a summons, tell them to have a good day, drive safely, walk away, get back in your car. Don't admonish, don't get into a pissing match, don't take the cards away from people. If you're going to use your discretion, walk away, and that be the end of it.
But that's the same respect that I would give another person in law enforcement, whether it's on the job or in another agency, would be the same respect that I would give a civilian. So if I walked up to a car and the civilian said, "Officer, I'm so sorry. I didn't see the light turn red. I went right through it. I'm so sorry." "All right, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Have a great day. Thanks for your honesty." That's all I look for. I look for honesty, So it was the same thing. Like you said, you're gonna sit there and lecture somebody. That's not what you're doing. I look for honesty, and then you show your discretion. What's Scott Wagner, detective from Spanish Harlem? I used to work in Spanish Harlem in a 2-3 and 2-5. I love that place over there. The specialist shield supposedly belonged to the command. You could transfer and keep it. You couldn't transfer and keep it. So I know now that it stays with the person, no matter
absolutely.
what. Yeah. And sometimes they'll actually take a specialist shield and redesignate somebody a detective investigator if they go to an investigative position and take the specialist shield. I understand what he's saying. Like there used to be like in certain commands, certain things they would give like for DV, they would give like specialist shields
Right.
to DV and stuff because it really wasn't an investigative route. But as far as I remember, that when that person was a detective specialist, they took it with them, and you would hope. I'm sure as you as a CO would hope that somebody you could get that that rank to somebody else that took that position in the command.
Right, and it works the other way too. If you're in an investigative unit and you get moved to a non-investigative assignment, you get redesignated to a specialist, because
Right.
a third grade detective is a third grade detective. You're either a specialist or an investigator. So if you were a victim of such horrible insubordination, would you delegate the log for someone else to call in for you, especially when you're the victim? You know what? I mean, I don't think it you're talking about the police commissioner telling the chief of department to drop a log, and the chief of department is the one who intervened and witnessed it. There's no there's there's no cases that you could compare it to. So, would I call the log in myself if I was a police commissioner and I'm telling the chief of department? In that instance, probably I would, because I already knew from my interactions with Madry that he's not going to comply, and he's not on my team. That him and Shepard are aligned, as opposed to. But still, you're the police commissioner. You expect people to follow your orders.
And one of the other problems with there is, he's calling into one of Madry's appointments. So Madry's not going to call it into, so I think at that point you probably want to call it in yourself to make sure it's done. I mean, I never delegated anything like that. The same reason I didn't delegate CDs, command disciplines. If somebody was going to get a command discipline, then I would issue it. All right. And I hated when bosses would tell me to go, hey, go give that guy a CD. No, I'm not gonna, because I didn't observe any infraction. Why am I giving the CD out? You want to give a CD out? You write the command discipline. I don't need to write it. And if I was ordered to write it, which is a lawful order, then I would write such and such, observe this command discipline, the infraction. So I think you're better off doing it yourself and personally. What's KB says, as a third star, isn't there an extra Department of Investigations form as an executive? I know they do a financial disclosure and stuff every year, right? And
Yeah, because anything from 2-star up you're considered a city executive. You're not even part of the Captain's Endowment Association union, which covers up to 1-star chief. So I don't know. I never even made it to chief. So I don't know about any extra forms when you get into that higher upper executive. But I know there probably is forms, because you're going into another union. You're now a city executive, so there's probably a bunch of forms that they have to fill out. Good question, Marlon. Why didn't Donlan just take Street Shield and suspend him himself? He says in the lawsuit that he felt that he knew it was useless and that it wasn't going to stand, and that they had the backing of the mayor. But do it and let the mayor overturn it. Because it would have to, because you're the police commissioner. If you're suspending somebody, who's going to unsuspend them? Who's going to lift that suspension?
That's what I totally agree. You just like Marlon's saying, he should have done it. Just do it, and then whatever. Let the chips fall where they may. You don't let that go ahead like that, and you just do it yourself. So.
Tabitha Foster, thank you. $9.99 for the podcast. Thank you for the information shared. Hey, listen, that's what we're here for. We're here to try to help people navigate through difficult times, and it's obviously difficult times right now. Talk about the way it's supposed to be, the way it used to be. We're talking about all of this alleged corruption in the upper echelon and in the executive core, as well as the administration of the mayor, right? And the reason to expose it and talk about it and discuss it is in hopes that, like history, right? If you don't know about history, it's bound to repeat itself. So if you talk about it and you expose it, you're hoping that the next administration that comes in is going to clean this all up, remove the bad apples, reinstate integrity into the department, and make it the great and respected department that it once was.
You want to address Logic's finest question right there? I think that's a pretty good question. It kind of goes right into what you were just talking about.
Inspector Leyson, would it be enough to change the chiefs and commissioners to turn the NYPD around? And would you or Chief Lukach, or what would you or Chief Lukach do if you were commissioner and/or chief of department? I know what Eric's answer is to this, because he already said it in here, that all chiefs are compromised. He says it all the time. All chiefs are compromised. I completely disagree that all chiefs are compromised. I do believe that you would have to turn over the entire upper echelon. I've said this in the past, that the entire upper echelon would have to be overturned. But again, you can't walk in day one and just cut the complete head off the snake. Obviously, certain moves would have to be made, but you have to be able to, depending on where you come from too, right? Like Rob and I, we have knowledge of a lot of the executives that would probably exhibit the integrity and have the experience to do a good job in a lot of the positions. We talk about it all the time, right? Putting the right people in the right seats on the bus. And so a lot of changes would have to happen, but I don't think that every chief, I think almost every bureau chief would have to be changed. I'm not going to say for sure all, because I'm not going to make a blanket statement like that. What about you, Rob?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if you can say that every chief is compromised. I think, but if I was to be put in that spot, I would because of the corporate knowledge that we have, both Ron and I would get rid of a lot of people that first day, and I promote the people that I know can do the job and bring them up and make sure that they have a level of integrity and respect for themselves and for the hierarchy of the police department. Because if you set the tone right up on the top, everything else will fall in place down below. But right now, there's such turmoil on the top that a cop coming into work doesn't know, from day to day what's going on. What is the real mission of the police department? There needs to be somebody in there that is definitive on what we're doing, is strong, and will take the department in a direction that needs to be taken. And I would also, if I was in that position, I would tell Mayor Adams, you either want me to run the department or I don't run the department. So it's your choice. I don't need you or have your cronies or anybody else telling me who I can promote, who I can't promote, and who I can't put in positions. And you put me in this position to trust me so that I do the right thing. So if you're giving me that authority and that trust, then allow me to move forward. If you don't like what I do in a year or 2 years later, then remove me. But you know what? I'm willing to take that. I'll take that job with the respect and understanding that I can do it, and I would turn things around.
And to that point, last night, another great episode on the 10-4 Tavern, where Tom Joyce and Pete Viselli have the podcast on the Finest Network, Finest Unfiltered Network. And they had Gary McCarthy, who was the former Deputy Commissioner of Operations, who was in charge of Comstat, Chicago Police Commissioner, and Newark, in charge of Newark, New Jersey's superintendent. And he said when he went and interviewed for those positions, he made sure that the mayor who was hiring him understood, I will keep your politics in mind, but I need the autonomy to run this department. and he was guaranteed that authority. And then once he got in, he started making his moves. He got phone calls, he said, from the chief of staff and the mayor. You can't move that guy, blah, 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 blah. He goes, oh, yes, I can. And I did, because I was told that I have that authority. And that's what you needed. And I think that when Mayor Adams was interviewing people, we talked about this in the past, it came out in the papers that Carmen Best, who I think would have been an excellent choice for police commissioner, withdrew her name from the nominations after sitting down with Timmy Pearson and Banks and finding out that she wasn't going to have the autonomy. She came out of that meeting just knowing, I'm not going to have the ability to run this department. And she withdrew her name from the hat. So Hunter says, when an MOS retires from the NYPD, do they turn their shield, ID card, and firearms on the 10 card? 10 card for those is a personnel card that's kept on file that lists your address, your phone number, the guns you have. Or do they get to keep them, pistols, until they get a civilian license? The way it works in the NYPD, before you retire, if you retire in good standings, you get what's called a good guy letter. You have to do all the paperwork, jump through all the hoops to get your license to carry your firearms before you retire. Otherwise, you do have to surrender your firearms until you get that license.
But there is a caveat to that, though. I think now, because of HR 218, if you go to the range and you qualify for HR 218, you'll get your HR 218 card, which allows you to carry within the country, so you don't have to turn your firearms anymore. And then you can apply for a pistol permit wherever you live, if you decide to go to Florida or whatever. But you're not like, I wasn't obligated to turn in my my guns when I retired, because I had the HR 218 card, which was issued by the department, and I kept my firearms.
And you moved to Florida. But if you're staying in New York, you have to get a New York City pistol license, and part of that, you have to have your 218 card to get your pistol license.
I know upstate. Okay, yeah, you need the good guy letter to get the HR 218.
Yeah. So let's see, we got a few more, and then we'll get out of here because we're running late. You see anything in here you want to?
What did Bobby say? He's asking you though, Ron. Inspector, do you think when Donlan is being called cognitively compromised, they're intimidating that alcohol use or abuse is an issue with Donlan? I don't know. I did not hear anything about any type of alcohol abuse with him and stuff. I think they're just trying to diminish his reputation, and they're, in my opinion, they're bullying him. That's all they're doing. They're trying to, and it's slanderous. They shouldn't be doing anything. They should be, like we've said before, like Ron said earlier, you got to keep quiet. There's a lawsuit pending. You don't want to make stupid statements like that, and that's what I think it is. Any others, Ron?
No.
What was the logistics finest? There's something there. I don't know if you want to.
But Koch,
yeah.
Inspector Leyson, my buddy's dad was Mayor Koch's chief of security detail. He told us in the early '80s that it only takes a handful of guys at the very top, to change or ruin the entire NYPD. Well, what's old is new again. From the '80s to 2025. That is true, that allegedly it's a handful of people, but obviously we know that the NYPD is in chaos, and it's very difficult. So, all right. Well, I think we covered a lot, and great interaction, as always, with the chat throughout the show. We appreciate your input, and we appreciate the interaction. We like to interact with the chat, and it helps us, to be perfectly honest, because we know we're losing you if the chat is completely off the rails and not talking about anything that we're talking about. That means that we're losing your interest. So the fact that we're keeping your interest means a lot to us, that you stay engaged with us. So we really appreciate that. We're trying to build this network. We're trying to build the podcast. So share it, like it, subscribe, set the notifications. When you set the notifications, you'll get notifications for all the shows on the Finest Unfiltered network. So before we close it out, Rob, any closing thoughts or statements?
Just to thank the chat, like you said, thank our listeners and followers. Hit that share and like button for us. Love the questions. We're on Wednesdays at 17:05. I said that right, 17:05, which is 5:05 p.m. Hey, if during the week you have questions, write them down, and then when we come back next Wednesday, feel free to ask. I mean, you don't often get an opportunity to ask two executives from the police department questions, but hey, we're willing to answer. We're not afraid to answer, and we'll tell you the truth. That's the bottom line. You're not gonna get a song and dance from us. We're two honest guys, and we have no axe to grind. So we'll tell you exactly what the truth is. So I just want to thank everybody, and Ron, thanks for producing the show. You did a great job, and always good seeing you. And thank you, everybody.
Tomorrow we have Owen Troyer. He's going to be back on the Sal Greco show tomorrow at 1:05 p.m. Then on Friday, you'll have the roundtable with Eric, John, and Marlon. And I'm not sure who usually they've been bringing on a fourth person to add to the cast of characters and talk about whatever's going on. And as we see, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to still talk about. There's a lot of stuff coming down the information pipeline about a lot more stuff that might be coming down and dropping. So if anything does drop, I'm sure that they'll talk about it. If they get credible information, they may talk about it before it drops. A lot of times that happens. You see most of the stuff that we talked about and we heard about in these lawsuits have been spoken about on the show in the past. And then we'll be back. On Tuesday. Let's not forget our friends Tom and Pete. We'll have the 10-4 Tavern. You can check them out at 7:05 p.m., 19:05 for John. And they are on Tuesday nights. Always some really great guests they've had. They've had, I believe the third episode was this week, and they've had really great guests. And so I enjoy watching their show. And then we'll be back on Wednesday next week at 5:05 p.m. with the Executive Perspective. Until then, everybody stay safe. Oop.